What if I told you the things you're desperately chasing, the fit body, the sports car, the money, the big house, the perfect woman, they aren't actually what you really want? I know because I caught some of them, and everyone complicated my life instead of completing it. It took me 40 years to figure out what I was really after, and in the next 10 minutes, I'll save you those 40 years. My name's Kirk, and welcome to this channel. Here's the part I'd rather skip. This started early for me. When I was a kid, I had every Tonka truck worth having and the biggest sandbox in the neighborhood. And I can tell you exactly what that sandbox got me. It set me apart from everyone else. It also sat empty. The kids in the neighborhood, they didn't come over. They didn't have what I had, and somehow that meant they didn't want to be around it or around me. I was a little boy standing in the middle of the best sandbox on the block, wanting one thing the sandbox couldn't buy: somebody to play in it with me. Now, a kid can't understand the stuff is the problem. A kid decides, I don't have enough yet. So I spent the next 40 years making the sandbox bigger. By 13, I had my first girlfriend, and from 13 on, I was never without one, and they had to be very attractive. Now, I need you to hear how I just said that. Not I was drawn to attractive women. They had to be. Appearance wasn't a preference in my life. It was a necessity because everything around me was part of the display. The motorcycles, the stereo system that would bury anything anyone else owned. And that was the point. That would bury anything anyone else owned. The 79 Z28 in high school. And it didn't stop when high school ended. It escalated. The Ferrari. I kept that one for 14 years. The Jaguars, the Mercedes, the Maserati, the Corvette, the Cadillacs, the Lincolns, even limousines. And here's the sentence that should have stopped me cold years before it did. There are cars I owned that I can't even remember having. Now think about that. I spent decades of money, time, and attention on machines that were supposed to prove I was somebody, and some of them didn't even leave a memory because I was never actually collecting cars. I was collecting evidence for a case I was arguing to everyone around me and to myself that I was fine, that I was enviable, that there was nothing behind the curtain worth looking at. I wasn't building a life. I was building a hiding place. Here's the truth. All of it. The cars, the house, the adventures, the beautiful woman on my arm. It was a wall. And I built that wall around something I didn't want anyone to see, including myself. Some of you already know this part of my story because I've talked about it on this channel. I spent decades struggling with gender identity. And if that surprises you, a conservative guy, a man of faith, saying that out loud, I understand. I'll be going deeper into that story in a video that's coming because it deserves more than a paragraph. But I need you to understand something. That's not what this video is about because the struggle isn't the point. The hiding is the point. Whatever your version is, the drinking nobody knows about, the debt, the anger, the thing you decided a long time ago that no one can ever find out, the pattern is identical. You don't just avoid the thing, you build an entire impressive life on top of it. And then you call the life the point. The car isn't a car. The house isn't a house. The body isn't a body. They're bricks. And you can't figure out why you're exhausted because nobody tells you what it costs to be a full-time bricklayer for a wall around your own heart. I wasn't chasing those things because I wanted them. I was chasing them so I would never have to sit still. because sitting still meant looking, and looking was the one thing I couldn't afford. Let me tell you what I do for a living, because it gave me a strange kind of education. I'm a reseller, have been for decades, and now I'm opening a resale shop, which means I have spent my adult life handling other people's dreams after they're done with them. Everything that crosses my table was, at some point, the answer. Somebody stood in a store or scrolled a listing at midnight and believed that this was going to do something for them. The watch that was going to announce they'd arrived. The exercise machine that was going to finally produce the body. The designer bag, the collection somebody spent 15 years assembling. And in one day, it all ends up with me in a box. And the person handing it over almost never says, "I love this." You know what they say? "I don't even know why I bought half of this." Here's the part that should stop you cold. In my shop, everything goes on a clock. It sits on the floor, and if it doesn't sell, the price drops and keeps dropping. And eventually it's donated or it's gone. That's what the market says these things are worth once the feelings wear off. Somebody's "I'll finally be happy" on a markdown schedule. Nobody's chase survives contact with my price gun. And I need to be honest with you about the strangest part. I knew all of this. I watched this every single week. Other people's evidence collections coming across my table, and I still kept building mine. That's how strong the hiding is. You can literally handle the proof all day long and drive home and buy another car. So how does a story like mine end? It ends the way these stories always end. The wall came down, just not the way I'd have chosen. The business failed big. The marriage ended. The money went with both. And I went from a Ferrari and a huge custom house to broke and then to homeless. A friend took me in. And I want you to sit with the details here because God has a sense of humor. He let me stay in his mother's house. She had just passed, and I drove her car, a Buick Century with over 250,000 miles on it. The fenders were rusted so bad they lifted at highway speeds. I used to joke that the car was trying to take off. So understand what that means. I had spent 40 years choosing every object around me, every car, every square foot, to say Kirk is somebody. And now I lived in a dead woman's house and drove a dead woman's Buick, and for the first time in my life, nothing around me said anything. I wasn't holding the pen anymore. And here's the part I need you to hear, because this is the whole video. It still hadn't stopped. A friend looked at me during the stretch and said, "Kirk, you need to swallow your pride." And I genuinely did not know what he was talking about. Pride? Look at me, no home, no money, a car that shook at 60. Pride in what? But he was right. Because you know what I was proud of? Surviving it. I was proud that a man who'd had a Ferrari could take this fall and still stand there like it wasn't killing him. The performance had lost every prop it ever had, and I was still performing. They took the bricks. I was still standing guard at the wall. I was surviving. I was not living. And I was miserable in a way I couldn't even admit into a mirror. Now here's the part that should have been simple. I was already in recovery rooms, had been for a while. I went to the meetings, I said the words, and I could not see that any of it was about me. That's how good the wall was. I could sit in a folding chair, surrounded by people telling the truth, and stay standing. I was attending recovery the way I'd done everything else in my life, as a performance of a man who was fine. What finally got through wasn't my crisis. It was somebody else's. Someone close to me had their secret come out, the drink they'd been hiding. And it hit me somewhere I didn't expect. It sent me to Al-Anon, the program for people whose lives are tangled up with somebody else's addiction. And I want to be honest about why I went, because it's embarrassing and it's perfect. I went to fix them. I hit meeting after meeting. I speed dated every Al-Anon room in driving distance, collecting tools, looking for the technique that would fix this person. Watching what a secret had done to someone I loved, the hiding, the managing, the performance of fine. I was watching a documentary about myself, and I bought a ticket thinking it was about them. Somewhere in there, my friend's sentence finally landed. Swallow your pride. It never meant stop acting rich when you're broke. It never meant put down the wall. Let somebody see what's actually there. And when I finally did, slowly, badly, in fits and starts, in those rooms and before God, I found out the thing I'd spent 40 years preventing was the only thing I'd ever actually wanted. Do you remember the sandbox, the best sandbox on the block, and it sat empty, and all I wanted was somebody in it with me? I had spent my whole life trying to solve that with a bigger sandbox. It turns out the answer was never bigger. The answer was letting somebody pass the fence. So let me tell you what's on the other side of the wall, because I promised you at the start of this video that I'd show you what you're actually seeking, and here it is. Freedom is not what I thought it was. I thought freedom was having enough money, enough evidence, enough proof that I was somebody. Real freedom is this. I could tell you everything I just told you on camera with my name on it, the homelessness, the Buick, the pride, the struggle I hid for decades, and my heart rate doesn't change. The thing I organized my entire life around preventing being seen is now just Tuesday. Freedom is walking into a room and not scanning it for what people think of me, because I already know who I am and I didn't ask them. Freedom is looking at what I own, and I still like nice things. I still love a great car, and knowing that if it all left tomorrow, I'd already survived that. And the man would still be standing. Not the performance of a man, the man. And who did I find back there? Behind the 40 years of bricks? I found out my worth was settled before I earned $1 of it. Settled by the God who made me, who saw behind the wall the entire time and stayed anyway. I spent 4 decades trying to build proof that I was somebody I already was. The evidence was never admissible anyway, because the case was already closed. So here's the reframe. And if you take one idea from this video, take this. Every single thing you're chasing for a feeling. Wanted, enough, safe, somebody. And the brutal math I had to learn is that the chase can't produce the feeling, because the chase itself is the announcement that you don't believe you're worth it yet. You cannot buy your way to a verdict that's already been handed down. Now, I'm not going to leave you with a reframe. Reframes were off by Thursday. I'm going to leave you with something to do, because that's how I got free, not by an insight, but by a practice. Tonight, one question. Get somewhere quiet, no phone, and ask yourself, what am I hoping the next thing will keep people from seeing? Not what you want, what you're hiding. Sit still with it. And sitting still will be harder than you think. I told you, sitting still was the one thing I couldn't afford for 40 years. And then this is the part that matters. Tell one safe human being what came up. 1. Tell a friend, a pastor, a sponsor, a room full of strangers in folding chairs. Because here's what I know that I didn't know then. The wall doesn't come down from inside. It comes down the the first time somebody sees what's behind it and it doesn't leave. The kids never came to the sandbox, but that was then. Somebody will come now. You just have to open the gate. If this video hits something in you, subscribe. This channel is where I think out loud about becoming the man behind the wall instead of the one in front of it. And if you know a man who's laying bricks, send him this. I spent 40 years surviving. I'd rather you started living tonight. The choice is yours.